My relationship with my stepdad, Eddie, has been strained from the start, largely due to a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. It all began when my mom, in a desperate attempt to prevent her dying mother from moving in with us, told Eddie a hurtful lie. She claimed I had callously remarked that his ailing mother was a burden. This fabrication, born out of fear and stress, irreparably damaged Eddie's perception of me. But let me give you some context. I'm a 16-year-old high school student, navigating the complexities of adolescence while juggling the dynamics of a blended family. My mom, who is 40, and Eddie, who is 42, got married 2 years ago. My existence is the result of a short-lived post-college relationship between them, a fling they assumed would fizzle out quickly. But fate had other plans, and my arrival ensured they would remain connected, if not romantically, then as co-parents. Growing up, I've split my time equally between my mom's and dad's homes, a balancing act facilitated by their unwavering commitment to my well-being. They sacrificed career opportunities and personal ambitions to remain in the same city, ensuring I could seamlessly transition between households. Eddie's presence, however, has added a layer of complexity I never anticipated. Eddie, despite having 2 sons of his own from a previous relationship, has struggled to accept me. His sons, aged 15 and 12, lost their mother tragically when the younger one was born. Before marrying my mom, Eddie and his kids lived separately, primarily due to his ailing mother who lived with them. After their marriage, Eddie made the decision to move his mother to his sister's care, and subsequently moved in with us along with his sons. Initially, Eddie's aloofness towards me was perplexing. When he first entered our lives, he seemed polite enough, engaging in small talk and showing a surface-level interest in my life. However, after a few visits, he abruptly ceased all communication with me. It was as if I had become invisible to him overnight. At first I brushed it off, assuming he was preoccupied, or perhaps adjusting to the idea of a new family dynamic. But as weeks turned into months, and then years, his indifference towards me became glaringly obvious. Eddie's refusal to acknowledge my presence extended beyond mere avoidance. It bordered on deliberate exclusion. In our shared home, he and his sons interacted freely, while I was met with silence and avoidance. It was as though I had committed an unforgivable offense, yet I had no clue what I had done to deserve such treatment. Despite his cold demeanor, Eddie never openly criticized or confronted me. Instead, he chose to ignore my existence altogether, a passive-aggressive stance that left me feeling like an outsider in my own home. My mom, caught in the middle, attempted to justify Eddie's behavior, citing personal reasons she couldn't disclose. She insisted she had spoken to him about it, but his stance remained unchanged. Her unwavering support for Eddie, despite my emotional distress, left me feeling isolated and invalidated. She urged me to be patient, to understand the complexities of adult relationships, and to extend grace even when it wasn't reciprocated. Living under the same roof with Eddie and his sons became increasingly challenging. While my mom provided a sense of stability and comfort, her efforts couldn't compensate for the palpable tension that permeated our home. I dreaded Eddie's presence, the uncomfortable silences, and the feeling of being unwelcome in my own space. Every visit to my mom's house became an exercise in emotional preparation, bracing myself for another round of isolation and neglect. Despite my efforts to maintain a positive attitude and treat Eddie with kindness, his indifference weighed heavily on me. I couldn't comprehend why he harbored such animosity towards a teenager who had done nothing to provoke it. I longed for a sense of acceptance, a basic acknowledgement of my presence, but Eddie remained steadfast in his silent rejection. As time passed, I resigned myself to the reality that Eddie's feelings towards me might never change. His relationship with his own sons, though distant at times, highlighted the stark contrast in how he treated me. While they received his attention and affection, I was left on the sidelines, a bystander in my own family dynamic. Despite the challenges, I refused to let Eddie's behavior define my relationship with my mom or dictate my self-worth. I found solace in the unwavering support of my dad and other family members who valued and accepted me unconditionally. Their reassurance reminded me that I was deserving of love and respect, even if Eddie couldn't see it. Today, as I reflect on the tumultuous journey of navigating stepfamily dynamics, I'm grateful for the resilience it has instilled in me. I've learned valuable lessons about empathy, forgiveness, and the complexities of human relationships. While Eddie's indifference continues to sting, I've grown stronger in my ability to navigate adversity and cherish the genuine connections that sustain me. In conclusion, my journey with Eddie has been marked by misunderstanding and emotional turmoil. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, his reluctance to accept me has shaped my experience within our blended family. Yet, amidst the challenges, I've discovered resilience and inner strength that continue to guide me forward. she would become highly emotional and accuse me of being ungrateful because I seemed to be ignoring all the sacrifices she had made for me. She insisted I should just overlook Eddie's behavior towards me and endure it for her sake. I wanted to argue with her, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I never told my father about any of this because I knew he would be very upset and would definitely confront my mother. They were very different people with distinct ideas on how to raise me, resulting in frequent arguments. However, I knew something as significant as this could lead my father to pursue full custody or another extreme measure. I didn't want to cause drama, so I avoided telling him and pretended everything was fine with my mother and her new family. Eddie and my mother had been together for a year before marrying, and they've been living together for 2 years now. I've endured this behavior for 3 years, but recently I've reached my breaking point. What happened recently pushed me over the edge, and I decided I couldn't tolerate it anymore. Last month, I was supposed to spend the entire month at my mother's house. As usual, Eddie and his children were ignoring me. I was already going through a rough patch due to conflicts with some friends from school, and my mind wasn't in the right place. About 2 weeks ago, I woke up one morning to find the house completely empty. This triggered a meltdown for me because just the night before, everything seemed normal, or as normal as it gets in my mother's house. They were all chatting with each other and ignoring me, but there was no mention of anyone leaving. When I called my mother to ask about it, she answered and casually mentioned that she, Eddie, and the kids had gone on a little trip for the week. She asked me to stay at home alone and take care of things. It's summer break, so I didn't have school. But I didn't think it was appropriate to leave me alone in the house and expect me to act as a caretaker. I expressed my disagreement to my mother, telling her I wasn't ready to spend all day at home watching the house. If security was an issue, she should have increased security measures rather than tricking me into staying home. Moreover, I was upset that they hadn't even informed me about their plans to go on a trip, and had left me completely in the dark. They didn't even have the courtesy to tell me beforehand so I could decide for myself whether I wanted to stay or not. I probably would have agreed because as a high school guy, having an empty house to myself is appealing. I might have invited a couple of friends over and enjoyed a few days, but I was so angry that I didn't even feel like doing that. My mother's mistreatment of me made me feel terrible. Additionally, since I was fighting with my friends, I didn't have anyone to invite over at the time. I was going through a difficult time overall, and my mother's behavior just added to my misery. I told my mother she owed me an apology for what she did. I could understand if Eddie didn't like talking to me, but the least they could do was inform me before leaving. It wasn't right to wake up one morning and realize I was all alone. Her response was dismissive. She brushed it off, telling me I was overreacting and needed to get over it. She didn't even wait for my response before hanging up. When I tried calling her back, she ignored my calls and texted me that she was trying to enjoy her trip. She promised to talk to me once she reached the hotel. I was so upset that I decided to leave. I knew leaving meant the house would be completely empty, but I didn't care anymore. I tried calling my mother to let her know I was leaving, but she didn't answer, and my calls went straight to voicemail. I locked up the house and left the keys under a potted plant, where my mother usually leaves them when she's away. Then, I went to my dad's place to stay with him. When I arrived, he was surprised to see me back so soon because he expected me to stay at my mother's until the end of the month. However, I had reached my limit, so I came back to him and told him everything that had been happening. I explained Eddie's ridiculous behavior towards me and how he had influenced his children not to talk to me. I felt like I had done something wrong, though I couldn't pinpoint what. I also told him how my mother had refused to discuss the issue and allowed things to continue as they were, no matter how much it hurt me. Her excuse was that she believed Eddie had valid personal reasons, but she wouldn't disclose what those reasons were, leaving me in the dark about everything happening around me. I had endured this for long enough. All for my mother's happiness. She constantly reminded me of the sacrifices she had made for me in her life, expecting me to endure this situation for her. However, it had become unbearable. I couldn't tolerate it any longer. I was done. I had to tell my father because he deserved to know what my mother was putting me through. Maybe he could do something to change the situation because I was exhausted from being treated poorly, despite my efforts to be kind and compassionate to everyone. After venting everything to my father, I burst into tears. I hadn't realized how much this had been weighing on me for the past few years. Before Eddie came into our lives, I had a normal relationship with my mother. However, everything changed after they got together, and nothing was the same anymore. After listening to me, my father said only one thing: he would take care of everything for me now. He was obviously upset, but he didn't share any of his feelings about the situation with me. He expressed relief that I had confided in him and assured me that I would be living with him from now on. If I chose to go back to my mother, it would be my decision, but he wouldn't recommend it to me. Since then, I've been living with him. I haven't tried to call my mother, and she hasn't attempted to contact me either. Her decision to leave her son behind, alone in their home, while she embarked on travels with her new family was a deep emotional wound for me. I felt abandoned and hurt, struggling to understand why she had chosen to prioritize her new life over staying connected with me. Despite the hurt, I sought solace in conversations with my father, whose understanding and support brought me some relief. I resolved not to let her actions affect me too deeply. Days passed without contact until finally her call came. I expected concern, or perhaps an apology, but instead she unleashed a barrage of accusations. It took me a moment to realize that she was blaming me for a robbery that occurred after I had left the house. Valuables, including their television and other expensive items, were gone, and she held me responsible. I was stunned. I had tried to inform her of my departure, but she had ignored my attempts to communicate. When I finally confronted her about her treatment of me, she abruptly ended the call and subsequently refused to answer any of my calls. Her defense when we finally spoke again was that I could have sent her a text. While technically true, I explained that in my anger and hurt, it hadn't occurred to me to do so. I had made it abundantly clear that I was upset and leaving, and I felt justified in my actions. A heated argument ensued. She insisted that I should have stayed home for safety reasons, emphasizing her trust in me. However, I reminded her that I had expressed my discomfort about staying alone, but she had dismissed my concerns and chose not to communicate with me. The situation escalated further when Eddie, whom I had not spoken to in years, suddenly entered the fray. His first contact with me in ages was to place blame squarely on my shoulders, chastising me for the carelessness that allegedly led to the robbery. His accusations were confusing and hurtful, especially considering our lack of interaction over the years. His statements about foreseeing my role in their downfall were particularly baffling and unfounded. As tensions within the family mounted, my father and I found ourselves aligned in our belief that my mother bore significant responsibility for the situation. She, however, stubbornly pinned the blame on me, escalating the conflict further. Now she was demanding financial compensation from my father for the damages incurred during the robbery. She argued that if he defended me, he should be prepared to pay the price for my actions. Feeling trapped in the middle of this chaotic family drama, I struggled to find a resolution. My mother insisted that I apologize to her and her family to end the dispute, but I was unwilling to do so. At the same time, I couldn't bear the thought of her continuing to harass my father over this issue. Update 1. 2 weeks after the incident, new revelations came to light that shed light on Eddie's long-standing animosity towards me. It was revealed that early in their relationship, Eddie had expressed a desire for his ailing mother to move in with them. My mother, uncomfortable with the idea and unwilling to take on the additional responsibility, concocted a deceitful narrative, placing the blame on me. She painted me as a disruptive force in their lives, falsely claiming that I had driven away previous partners and would cause trouble for Eddie's mother and children. This fabricated narrative poisoned Eddie's perception of me, leading him to cut off all communication with me, despite my efforts to maintain civility. Recently, Eddie had been pressuring my mother to sever ties with me entirely, citing the robbery incident as the final straw. Faced with the prospect of losing Eddie due to her lies, my mother finally came clean about the deception. She admitted that she had misrepresented my behavior to protect herself from confronting her own reservations about Eddie's mother moving in. The revelation left Eddie shocked and remorseful. In an email to me, he expressed deep regret for his mistreatment of me, acknowledging that he had believed my mother's fabrications without question. He apologized sincerely for the pain he had caused me over the years, hoping for forgiveness. Despite his apology, I found it difficult to process the extent of the betrayal and manipulation orchestrated by my mother. Unsure of how to respond, I chose to maintain distance and reflect on the situation before engaging further. In light of these developments, my father decided to pursue full custody of me. He saw my mother's actions as a betrayal of trust and believed that living with her was no longer in my best interest. I supported his decision wholeheartedly, eager to distance myself from the toxicity that had engulfed my life for so long. Update 2. The fallout continued to unfold as my father pursued legal action for custody, and Eddie initiated divorce proceedings. My mother, desperate to salvage her relationships, bombarded my father with messages begging him to intervene and reconcile with Eddie for the sake of their family. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as my father remained steadfast in his commitment to protecting me from further harm. I struggled to reconcile the woman I once loved as my mother with the manipulative figure who had orchestrated years of mistreatment and lies. Her willingness to sacrifice my well-being for her own convenience shattered any remaining illusions of her maternal devotion. Blocking her from all communication channels, I resolved never to engage with her again, prioritizing my own emotional well-being over any semblance of a relationship with her. For years, I had endured emotional turmoil in a futile attempt to secure her happiness. Now, as the dust settled on the chaos she had wrought, I found solace in the support of my father and the clarity of my own convictions. Clearly, she didn't feel the same way about her own son and only cared about her own happiness. That makes two of us who put her happiness first. Well, not anymore. Update 3. It's official, Eddie has filed for divorce. This news is literally all anyone is talking about right now, my family and a few common friends of my parents. My mother is handling this in a very strange way, posting sad quotes on social media. I've been receiving screenshots of these posts from my cousins. I don't know what she expects to achieve, but that's definitely not going to help. She made her bed, now she has to lie in it. Update 4. My dad now has full custody of me. It has been a couple of months, and my mother put up a good fight, but the divorce proceedings made everything super complicated for her. We had all the evidence of what she put me through, so she didn't really stand a chance. However, her lawyer managed to drag the case out for a couple of months at the very least. Anyway, I no longer have to visit my mother if I don't want to because my dad is the custodial parent. She does have visitation rights, but I don't see the point of that since I don't even want to talk to her anymore. I am happy with my father, and life is going pretty well. I've even made up with my friends and I'm looking forward to the future.